get the meeting called to order here. So it's January 6th, capital budget meeting, and present today, Katie,
Present, Katie Dugan.
Corey,
Corey Evans here, unmuted, thank
Ralph,
Ralph Dormitzer present.
Francine,
Francine Lyons present.
and Susan Franklin present. Okay, so let's see. The first item of business is the capital, the proposed funding request. Since we do have people waiting, do you guys want to change the order of things, or do you want to stick with the order as it is?
I vote that we change the order since it's administrative and get the Chief Quigley and IT up since they're here.
you. And I actually misread the 701. I thought it was a review of proposed funding requests, like review of the request, not of the form. So I misidentified the noun. So yeah, that's what I'm prepared to do as well.
Okay,
I agree.
so do we have to take a formal vote of that, or are we all right to just move ahead?
We're okay since we're
Okay.
past the time. It's really only if you bump something up earlier than the time specified, you want to be clear about it.
Okay, all right, Michelle, then let's start with the police.
Sure, Ann. Oh, there he is. Okay. Hey, Chief.
Hey there, long time no see. The meetings all day with Michelle. You want me to just jump right into it?
Sure.
Okay. Well, welcome myself to the fiscal year 26 budget hearing. So these are standard requests, and this is pursuant to policy, longstanding policy of capital budget. We're on a cruiser replacement program, and this year we looking to stick with that. And the final bids from the Greater Boston Police Council and Plymouth County are not in yet. We're sort of in between bids, but my best estimate is it's for two cruisers fully upfitted and marked and all that is $139,000. And again, that's pretty consistent with the prices we've been seeing. And the next item is we're paying year 3. We have the TASER lease program. We're in year 3 of that contract, and again, it's contractual. It's $20,235, and we have 2 years left on that lease. And the last thing is part of the radio replacement program. Again, we tried to replace the mobile radios on a we used to buy them all at once, and we'd come to capital, with the $80, $90, or $100,000 ask. So we've broken them up, and we're trying to spread that out over the course of about 9 years. So one of the radios is up to end of life, end of support life, and those radios are Motorola mobile radios that go in the cruisers at $8,300. So the total ask is $167,535.
Okay.
And just so everybody knows, we've been as we roll frontline cruisers off, we'll roll them into an administrative function, school resource, and once once we're done with them, usually after 5 years, we've been handing them off to different departments. Facilities has received 3 of them, a Tahoe and 2 police explorers. So it's worked out well, and it works. It works well in keeping them in vehicles and able to get around to the different town facilities. So we just turned another vehicle over to facilities probably last week, 2 weeks ago.
So after 5 years, that's sort of your useful life of a vehicle?
Yes.
For the front line.
Yeah, the front line. Yeah. Okay.
And Chief, I know we bought.
It's really 3 years as a front line, then 2 move back in the fleet or as a spare, and then we'll hand them off to facilities. They usually have about 100,000 miles on them.
I think last round you purchased the Explorer hybrids. Is that still the intention? Is there something that's changed on that? How are they performing in the field?
horribly.
Oh.
Yeah, we've had a ton of trouble with them. Problems with the batteries, and when they break, which is often, they're out of service for 5 or 6 weeks. We bring them, you can't exactly bring it to Robbins. It's its own thing. So
Okay.
we either go to Quirk or Janelle, and just the wait is unbelievable. They just don't have anybody trained up. They don't have the bench to fix these things. And most of the time it's nothing that has to be replaced, but it's some type of glitch, a computer glitch. And, in my view, it's something that can be handled quickly, but they're just not able to accommodate us. So, and it actually looks like Ford is phasing them out.
So, and how many of those do we still have in the fleet? And so going forward, we're just going to purchase standard internal combustion.
Yeah, and that's been the consensus among chiefs. We talked to, actually, Michelle was there. We talked to the Marshfield chief a couple months ago, and he's experiencing the same problems as well as some of the other local chiefs. But we still have, I believe, 2, and one will be rolled off in this round, either to facilities or a different department. It's very difficult the way we run them. It becomes particularly difficult in the winter with the heater on, and they're running basically 24 hours a day.
The computer brain doesn't get a chance to rest.
Yeah.
That's why we have robots, right? They need a rest.
Chief, just because I'm new, can you just orient me to the overall fleet size in terms of how many do we have in the frontline fleet and how many do we have in admin and backup, just so I have a sense what the total fleet is?
So Chief, before you answer that, Chief, there is a document, Katie, I just moved it to the new
Okay.
folder that had been loaded during the
Ro-
STM period. So
rolling
now
stock
it's in the
inventory.
primary folder.
Thank you.
Okay.
But go
Yeah.
ahead, Chief.
That document that Susan probably uploaded is pretty accurate, has mileage and years
Yeah,
and
it
VIN
does.
numbers and everything else.
Gotcha.
But there's like 13. In frontline cars, we have 1, 2, 4, 5, like I think it's 6 frontline cars. Then there's mechanical spares. Then you move into admin and detectives and things like that.
Okay.
Keep in mind we have school resource officers that have to have vehicles and things like that.
Gotcha. And so the total fleet of 13, and we're rolling over to a year, which gets us to roughly a 6-year period. Is that sort of the thought process?
Usually 5 for us. 5 is the schedule.
Yeah, not all these are the same duty cycle.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
We actually had a situation probably 2 years ago where we lost 2 or 3 cars totaled, tree falling on them, deer hit, and I tried to spread it. I didn't want to go because the insurance company replaces them. You get actual replacement value, so they just send you another police car.
Cool.
So we benefited from that because there's some years in our cycle, if we go by the plan that was developed, there'd be years when we needed 3 cars. So we've been able to avoid that because of the insurance replacements. And I've been trying to stagger them because I don't want them all. I don't want 3 cars that are, or actually more than 3 that are all, say, 2023s that are going to time out at the same time. So I've tried to strategically purchase new ones and space them out and take different ones out of service and try to be creative with just spreading out the mileage and the time on the road amongst the entire fleet.
So on this list, Chief, what are the 2 that would get phased out? I'm guessing the 2020 Explorer with 70,000 miles on it, and then the
886, and I can't remember the other one. I think the 883.
it looks like 82 and 890.
890 is one, and that's the one that went to facilities, I believe.
Okay.
I haven't seen that shit. It hasn't been updated since we transferred.
Okay, just curiosity. That wasn't
But generally, it's the oldest cars with the highest mileage.
gotcha.
I'm
I got
sorry.
no questions. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chief.
President.
Just to recap, you're not fixed on a number that you're that you're rolling every year. It flexes depending on what the schedule overall looks like, but it seems like it's been 2 or 3, correct?
It's usually 2,
Okay.
and every like 3 or 4 years, it's 3, but we've been able to avoid having to pay for the third car because of
Yeah.
insurance replacements.
Sorry.
Chief, the question I would have really has to do with the rollover to facilities. Since we have pretty well established that they should be buying trucks with the capability of having tools and equipment on board at all times, the question is, why are they taking on these particular vehicles when in fact they really need something quite different, which is what they've talked to us about repeatedly. So that does seem odd.
Yeah, well, no, these are more for the cleaners. The people who go, like the person who cleans the station, who cleans 135 King.
Okay.
They're really just carrying cleaning supplies.
Okay.
And they do have a cargo area. They can take, they take trash out and things like that. But it seems to work for them and works for us.
Okay.
All right.
And these are available, when something's coming offline, I let Michelle know, and they're available to any department really.
And these are not adds to what the departments already have. In other words, we assume that they're getting rid of something at the same time they're acquiring those. In other words, we're not continuing to add to the fleets.
I can't speak for facilities, but that's.
That is correct. Facilities recently had a blown engine. Chief Quigley was rolling this one off, so it made sense to give them the vehicle so they had transportation around town. And in each case, it's something like that, where their vehicle is no longer drivable. And the chief is rolling off one, so they're assuming it. Ultimately to save money for the town, if they can get by driving locally with these vehicles for their use. I think they're trying everything. I think the next person that will likely benefit from one of these vehicles may be the harbor master. But we'll have to see how that shakes out.
She's a truck person. I have never seen her in a passenger car in the entire 20 years I've known her. But anyway.
Yeah,
We
well,
do
we
have
will
a
be
few
rolling off a
of them
truck as
are.
well. So.
Yeah.
We're
I
rolling
think
off
there
the
are
truck.
3. There are 3, 4. There are 4 F-150s on this
F-150s, yeah.
list.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, we're finding the trucks they're about the same price and they're working really well for us. They're a lot more room and they're actually, quite frankly, built stronger. You're up a little bit higher,
Mhm.
and the officers seem to like them better. And it gives us more flexibility. A lot of times, we have to, moving barricades and picking up bikes and things like that. So they seem to work really well. And you can
These are
carry
the
a
Ford
prisoner.
150s. These are the
I'm
Ford
sorry?
150. These are the Ford 150s, Bill. Yeah.
Correct. The Ford F-150 police
Yeah.
special service package.
Right.
Sounds
We've
important.
had zero trouble with them too. I mean, it's been really great. As a matter of fact, we've had several chiefs, Plymouth included, Westwood. They've called and they're going to go with the system we're using. They liked our what we've done. So fun fact, if you see Plymouth PD in pickup trucks, it was parked to us.
You're getting the commission. Okay.
Yeah. I won't hold my breath.
I assume the F-150s are not going to work for frontline vehicles just because there's no space for passengers in the back.
No, there actually is. They're 4-door trucks and there's a prisoner compartment. Yeah.
Okay.
There's actually more room.
I'll take your word on it. Don't want to experience it, but thank you.
Understood.
Okay.
Okay. No, thank you for that. And thanks, Susan, for sharing that. That clears up a lot for me.
Yeah. And we love that you're on a cycle, and thanks for being clear about what's lease, what phase we are in different payments. It makes understanding everything much easier. So as always, appreciate it.
No problem.
Do
think
you-
I'm hanging out for IT discussion too.
Yeah.
Actually, Chief, if we're gonna wrap up, I did have a question on the 10-year plan, just about the tasers, because I understood it to be a lease and it was a 5-year lease, but then there was a gap in the 10-year plan where there was no requirement for funding in 29, 2030 and 2031 and 2032, and then it reappeared. So are you holding on to the tasers? Or is that going to be a recurring payment that we just need to sort of carry out?
I would plan on it be reoccurring, but that said, there might be opportunity to purchase after the lease, so there might be a gap in there. They're talking about that at the company's name is Axion. They're talking about that, so I didn't, and obviously I can't commit to another lease until it's time to commit to another lease.
Yeah.
So it was, it's sort of up in the air, so that's an unknown. But
Okay.
I don't see going away from tasers, so it's going to continue in one form or another.
I was just wondering, and you answered my question, which is like the gap is more of a question as to whether you land out purchasing at the end of the lease and we own them for, perhaps a little bit longer on the tail end of the life cycle, and then re-enter into a new lease when they're truly time for a technology changeover. Because it felt to me like, and again, this is me simplistically, like how much changes in taser technology that you really truly need like a whole new set of taser technology every 5 years.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And, I think we'll be able to, similar to leasing a vehicle, I think we'll be able to buy these at a very discounted price, because there's always something latest and greatest, but that comes with problems. So, there's no problem with holding them, after the lease is up, if we get a good deal on them. Because Axion is always pushing the latest, greatest thing. And sometimes that, that comes with training bills and everything else, overtime for training. So it's not an easy decision. And I need more information, and that information won't be available probably for another 18 months.
Okay. That's helpful. The only other question I had was on long guns. And again, it was just a timing thing in terms of the 10-year plan that was laid out. Because we just spent 17,000 at special town meeting for the 10. And then it looked like there was another 15,000 in 2028, and then a series of reoccurring charges 2031 to 2033. And I didn't know if there was a thought process behind that in terms of like whether there were more long guns that needed replacement or how you were thinking about that.
We've ordered the long guns from special town meeting. It takes a while to get these. That's why we asked to accelerate this to special town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of guns we're replacing is roughly 2/3 of what we have, because every car has a weapon.
Okay.
So would again trying to phase these as well. So we're taking the best of what is left, the best of the stuff that we currently have and holding it, and the other things will be put out of service and the new stuff will come in. But again, it's difficult to project with things like this, because you just don't know what's next in policing. So I'm trying to be realistic, but it becomes more and more difficult with the changes in the field.
No, what I didn't appreciate was that I thought we had replaced the full kit and caboodle with special town meeting, but you're telling me there's another third of the inventory that will be end of life or need to be replaced, and that's why there's a purchase in sort of the nearer future out there.
We're replacing the front line patrol rifles that are in the marked police cars, but detectives have there's ones that are assigned to a person as opposed to a car. So the detectives each have one. The SWAT members have their own, because they're sighted in to them individually. So down the road, we'll replace them, and because they're assigned to an individual, they don't get as beat up. The ones in the frontline cars get beat up because they're in and out of the car when officers are coming on and off duty. So those are the ones, the Vietnam era weapons that are really taking a beating. So
okay.
So based on
the
your
ones in the front line
program,
are going to be replaced.
So Chief, based on the 10-year plan, you're estimating like a 6-year life for these rifles? Am I reading that right?
I think we have, no, these weapons will 20, 25 years at least. But we're only, with the $17,000, we're not replacing every long gun that we have. We're replacing the majority, 2/3 of them.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand. So 17 is 2/3, and then in 2028 there's 15. That's the remaining third, and then after that it's 15 every year, which is why I was.
Yeah, because I don't know, I don't have a price. It's probably, I want to say we have 22 long guns, and we're replacing, I think it's, I don't have the sheet in front of me, but it's 2/3 of them.
Okay.
Okay, so you just have the far out years as a placeholder. You really haven't figured out what the frequency of replacement is going to be at this point.
Because this is the first time we've ever replaced them.
Yeah,
We've never
okay.
purchased long guns before.
Okay,
But
Yeah.
I have to assume 25 years minimum. The ones we have now are 45 years old.
Okay.
and one other question on the 10-year plan. There's 2 line items for radios.
One is portable radios, one is mobile radios. The portable radios are the ones the officers carry, they're assigned, you take them home. Every officer has one, and the mobile radios are in the cars, they're fixed.
Okay,
And there's a lot of grant opportunity, not grant, but funding from the SHREC for those radios.
mhm.
The last round of radios we got from the SHREC, and we just last month put radios in service. We've gotten some through federal grants as well. So we're doing pretty good with the portable radios. There's a lot of money out there for portable radios, and we chase that every year.
Okay. I was just asking because the paperwork you provided is for the mobile radios, but on the 10-year plan, they're both in the same fiscal period. So maybe one of these numbers is in their own column.
It could be. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay,
But most times the portable radios, we haven't had to purchase portable radios in a while. We've been fortunate with the grants. So a lot of times I'm just moving that down through the columns as a space holder. But we haven't purchased portable radios in a very long time, more than a
yeah,
decade.
so that's probably all it is that it's still in the 26 when it may be getting pushed further out.
Yeah.
Okay,
But mobile
that's the
radios
one-
are usually
the
what we're on the hook for.
169. The 167, 535, which is I think what you said what the number was, but this is
Correct.
totaling 175, 835. So it's just that has to be moved. Okay.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions for the chief?
That's it for me.
Okay,
Okay, great.
sounds good. Thanks.
Well, we appreciate you're taking the time to present tonight, chief.
No problem. I'll be back, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
Thanks.
We've got our first input in our Excel spreadsheet of requests, so we'll go from there.
Okay, so
Should fund Dan to get a new camera. Like a Creative Labs little classic 2000s camera, USB camera.
Good evening.
you're on.
Ron?
Hello.
Hey.
Well, thank you for having Dan and myself. For those who aren't aware, Dan Kelly is my deputy CIO, and this is his first foray into the capital budget process, so please be gentle with him.
Oh no. Oh, you should have told us.
He'll be taking point on some of the access point discussion tonight. And the chief had mentioned he'd come back. What I propose is from an IT perspective, we proposed or submitted 2 projects. One was the access point and the network upgrades. The other was a line of sight point-to-point network upgrade. our extension, and that's where the chief comes in because it's a public safety facing interface, a network. And he can probably give you a great deal of insight as to why we're moving forward, or we want to move forward with that.
Then
And
Ron, let's start with that because that's its own project. We were looking at Chief for other stuff as well. So if we start with that, I think it's easy to digest.
Okay, great. So,
Excuse me, could I just jump in for a second? I'd love to have one comprehensive sort of document that identifies all the things that that you intend to spend money on. And the reason I ask that is when I look at get on the website, I look at least 10 different things I should actually look at, and I don't have any one that's comprehensive and complete. At least with the line items and the dollars and some basic information. So it makes it very difficult to actually say what should we do with sort of a comprehensive sort of understanding of everything that you're asking for. So I have a very different view about whether you do this piece by piece or whether we do this comprehensively first and then come to the piece to piece after we understand it. Because we don't have a list, as it turns out now.
we have two funding request forms. The first is sort of the standalone project for the $54,000, which is the line of sight wireless antenna. And the second, we have a second funding request form, which is for the access point replacement, which is for the $224,000. That encompasses 3 of the quotes that are in the OneDrive for the Extreme port, the Wi-Fi licensing, the Extreme switch labor. And then the other thing that we have, but we don't have a funding request form from Ron because it is spread across the departments, is for the camera conversation. And that is what Corey pulled together into an Excel spreadsheet, which is for the $233,253. So we have 3 requests. It's just, it did take a little bit to piece that together, Ron. I do agree. But I think there's 3 discrete requests, and Ron, you can correct me. There's the line of sight wireless antenna for $54,000. There's the access point and switching conversation for $224,000. And then there's a third conversation which spreads across all of the town departments, which is for cameras, which is basically an add-on to the network that we're building out.
correct.
Okay.
3 individual projects. There are caveats tied to pretty much every one, and there's a fair amount of discussion or dialogue that has to occur to try to understand what it is we're trying to do. So we do have some PowerPoint presentations. If you want to see those, we can run through those quickly, but they are all tied to individual projects as well.
And Ralph, I'm with you completely. That's actually why I started the sheet I did, because I was struggling with, we've got so many things in the air here. I was like, how do I keep all of this in my head? So I'm with you 100% that part of this discussion is us building a roadmap to figure out how we want to digest this. And we made, like just Katie said, in my head, I made this kind of the 3 bucket. I also kind of had the 3 bucket system in mind. If you think that we need to make a master bucket to have those 3 buckets in to make it easier to understand, I'm totally for that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
This is really quite extensive, and given the fact we're up in the $500,000, $600,000 range, we really ought to. It's hard to get your arms around it, and the questions are quite extensive associated with all of that. So, yeah. In a way, what I'm saying, and perhaps in a broader sense, is that we still don't have what I would consider a 2026 set of asks across all the departments, and it's very, very hard right now to look individually at any department. I could say a little bit better for Bill Quigley, and for the police department. That's very straightforward, and I understand that well. But there's so many others coming down the pike. I'm really having a lot of trouble trying to sort it all out. And we don't have any one comprehensive document that really says, okay, here are all of the expenditures that are proposed, and here's how they line up. I don't know. Maybe I'm asking too much.
No, I'm on the same page with you. I actually talked with Michelle about this earlier. I talked with Susan about it as well, of having a master sheet that we're going to track. So
Okay,
in progress. Michelle's working on it. You're completely on the same page as all of us. It's not done yet, but I agree with it completely.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah, no disagreement at all.
I was under the understanding that the 10-year capital plan was inclusive of all departments and was in a single spreadsheet now. Is that not the case?
No, it is.
Oh, not yet.
Well, the problem is that this committee has not seen it.
Oh.
It's
Oh.
it's in the
It's on the
OneDrive.
OneDrive. I'm looking at it right now.
Susan's in it.
I'm in it,
I'm
yeah.
looking at it as
So
well, yeah.
that gives you the total ask for the entire town, does it not?
It does, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not like, I think Ralph's more referencing kind of an active document for this cycle that we can reference easily, that has data that's referenceable, like something that more of a working than a plan. So I think it's all about getting everything digestible. All the data's there. We just have to get it. Again, new committee, new members. We're trying to figure out exactly how we want to operate and stay on the same page.
No,
So
no,
we'll
I
get there.
understand. Anything I can
Yeah,
do.
and I also think, Ron, that, it's hard to just look at these things as a line item on a report and not really understand what the big picture is and, the objective of what your IT objectives are right now. So maybe if you could spend a few minutes on the big picture like that.
Absolutely.
That would
That
be
was
helpful.
my intent. I think it would be
Before we hop
time
in,
well spent.
can somebody circulate via email the 10-year plan?
I got you.
I've asked like 4 times via email for this.
Send it to you right now.
So would you like to start with the line of sight project and to let you know a little bit about that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So through many years of having issues with cell coverage and public safety issues along Atlantic Drive, Jerusalem, Sandy Beach, the park that we put the satellite phone, I forget that name eludes me at the moment.
Wadley Park.
Wadley Park. Through all of these through these issues that we've been dealing with, we've brought in Verizon, we've brought in AT&T, and we've tried to, over the last 5 or 6 years, try to come up with some solution that helps public safety in those areas where there are dead zones. I'm not sure how much of you are aware, but we are trying to put up a communications tower in Wheelwright. There was a lot of work that was done identifying that site and working with the state to make sure that that was appropriate. That is moving forward, hopefully. And with that site, with that communication tower in place, the goal is to install some antennas, microwave type antennas. I won't get into the technology of the frequencies and all of that, but public safety and first responders have their own dedicated frequency. So our intent is to introduce 2 antennas, one at Sandy Beach and one on the Wheelwright Tower, to extend our network and the public safety communications to that area, which is currently a dead zone. So in that light, I can turn it over to the chief and he can speak a little bit about, some of the issues, but essentially we have a mini PowerPoint, spelling out some of these issues that we've had and how we're planning on rectifying it. Chief?
Sure. So to what Ron said, along the shore, Atlantic Ave, Jerusalem Road, Wadley Park, Windy Hill, Linden Drive, Surrey Drive, all those little offshoots down along Jerusalem Road and off Atlantic Ave. There's very spotty cell phone coverage, and at some points you're really below, at sea level. And with the ledge, we have trouble talking out on our portable radios and mobile radios. There's legit dead zones. There's no radio contact, and we lose connectivity with the mobile data terminals inside the cruises. We've tried with AT&T and Verizon and all the major vendors to solve this, and they're just, I don't think it's economically feasible for them to do it. There's just not enough money there for them. With the popularity of Black Rock Beach and Wadley Park, since the pandemic, it's become really a go-to spot for a lot of people. And there's days when the beach is crowded and there's no cell phone coverage whatsoever down there. We've had situations, 2 that I can think of, one that I'll talk about now, where a person was suicidal down there. He went to the beach, he slashed his wrists, and he was found by a couple of bikers. They were trying to call 911. This guy was bleeding out and they couldn't get a signal. There was no house really close enough to run to. It ended up, the guy went out onto the beach and climbed up onto, this is a citizen that found this gentleman bleeding to death, literally, and climbed up on top of a rock and, you know, was dialing 911 frantically. He got a connection, but it connected to Revere police. So it took several minutes for Revere to figure out that this was coming from the shores of Cohasset, and there was, you know, substantial delay while this man was bleeding. And we've written AT&T and Verizon about this to no avail, to the point where we invested, or Ron researched into putting a call box down there, and there's a satellite phone that's attached to that call box at Wadley Park for safety, because, you know, if someone's drowning or needs medical attention, you're just not able to contact the outside world. So this will solve that. Additionally, with Sandy Beach, we experienced some of the same problems depending on your carrier. So this line of sight solution will rectify a lot of that, and also, I believe, provide Wi-Fi service for citizens that are on the beach, which is an added bonus. But mainly, the public safety radio bands and frequencies will become accessible if we can continue with this project.
And then a significant part of this is leasing revenue for the town after it's up. Can you go over where that comes from, who would be leasing from us, how that whole function works?
Well, it seems like Michelle stepped away. So what I'll say is we put an RFP out there for a communications tower in Wheelwright some year or so ago. What we landed on, and what I believe is being signed this week by the Board of Selectmen, is a lease for X number of years. And I believe if you calculate all of it out over the period of the lease, which is years, 20, 30 years, whatever that may happen to be, if it's extended, could be upwards of $1 million or 900 some odd thousand dollars. They are proposing to locate, I believe, 5 or 6 tenants on that tower, which will generate revenue. And Wireless Edge, the communications company installing the tower, is the one who is entering into the lease with us.
But that revenue, I mean, yes, it could offset this, but it could also offset a number of other objectives that the town has. So I understand the net zero comment, but I'm sure the select board has designs for that 900,000 in revenue that doesn't necessarily have capital budgets requests against it. So I guess my question is, like, should we consider this a net zero cost project, or should we consider it $54,000 project? Because I don't think select board is sort of carved off out of that revenue stream to cover this.
That's correct. We're proposing to put this up well in advance of potentially, that revenue coming in. I know Michelle has already received some amount of money, and she can speak to that with regards to the contract or the lease, but this is a $54,000 one-time cost to install antennas that extends our fiber network to a hybrid wireless network. So the ongoing service level agreement cost is minimal with that. I believe it's $5,000 or $6,000 in the IT budget, but essentially this is a one-time capital ask.
Can I jump in here? I think we have some clarification here that I need on this. One is, who is paying for this tower, the installation of the tower itself?
Wireless Edge, the leasing company who is leasing one RFP.
We lease it from them.
No, they are leasing the land from us. They own the tower. They will manage the infrastructure, etc.
Okay. How about the antennas themselves, AT&T, Verizon, whoever else is going up? How is the revenue apportioned there based on their usage?
Without the lease in front of me, I can't answer that. I'm not sure if Michelle has those numbers, rough numbers. No,
I don't have them in front of me.
Do we get any gain out of that ourselves?
We do. We get a
Good.
percentage every time. Like Ron said, they're leasing up to 6 vendors. Some of the largest carriers have been chasing us for months now. because they want to see this project get off the ground, but we're getting a percentage of those.
Okay, so there's some money there.
Yep.
The other piece of this really is your microwave antennas. Those are strictly our cost, are they?
The $54,000 is our cost to purchase antennas and have them installed.
Okay, so you've got one or more microwave antennas, maybe two on top of the tower.
We have one in both locations looking
Okay.
back at one another.
One in the tower. Where's the other one?
Sandy Beach is the proposed location.
Has anyone asked whether that aesthetically people will accept that?
We haven't had that conversation yet. My gut feeling is, having spoken with the individual and feedback from first responders, that they'd be amendable to that, especially in light with having public access and public safety to that connectivity.
Well, that's a different question. So the question really is the aesthetics associated with putting an antenna on Sandy Beach.
Yeah, I can't answer that. I can say that if we're talking about the antenna at Sandy Beach, we're talking about mounting it to the top of the building on a small mast. It's not obtrusive. It's probably about a dish network size antenna, something you'd find on someone's house for their TV. It's approximately 18 to 24 inches in diameter. That's the footprint.
Okay, so that's an add to this. As it turns out, the antenna itself, that is the Wi-Fi portion of the antenna, in fact, will work adequately at Sandy Beach, along Atlantic Ave, Jerusalem Road, and so on and so on. So this is an add to that. In other words, as I read it, in other words, you will get, irrespective of whether you actually have the microwave link or not, you will have, as a result of the antenna and AT&T's and Verizon's communications capability on this antenna at the top of basically, I guess, Wheelwright Park is where it's going. You still will have that capability. So that capability exists irrespective of whether or not you have these antennas. Am I right?
In theory, yes. I'm not
Okay.
100% sure you will see cell coverage all the way down to Sandy Beach based on this antenna.
But you're headed down a path that I was wondering also, Ralph, just because when the Wheelwright lease was pitched at town meeting, the whole pitch was to improve cell phone coverage in North Cohasset, especially in emergency situations. And so that was the whole pitch for leasing and putting up the antenna in Wheelwright to begin with. I guess what I hear the town asking is that we're not 100% sure that boost that we're going to get in cell phone coverage as a result of the Wheelwright project that we've previously approved is going to be enough. We have this one-time opportunity to kind of it further.
So we are hoping that the cell coverage is unanimously available across all of northern Cohasset. However, that connectivity in itself may not do or handle all of the services, the IT services and/or the public safety services that a proprietary 4.9 frequency, and here we're getting into the technical stuff, but a proprietary public safety network would supply. Part of this also gives the police department access back to SHREC services or the central dispatch services at the Hingham location. So there's a number of different components. And again, in order to fully understand exactly what services we're offering down there, we'd have to do a deep dive into exactly what frequencies and what services those frequencies provide. Again, we believe that the cell coverage coming from the tower, from AT&T and Verizon, will be 95% available to all of those locations. But again, it does not provide that proprietary service that our own municipal and first responder network would provide.
Okay, two clarifications. So the lease thing, and just to go back to that, town meeting's already, to Katie's point, town meeting's already approved the tower to be leased. So just simply speaking, and I'm not suggesting we do this, but if we don't spend this money, we'd still get the lease revenue from leasing the tower to the cell phone companies, correct?
Right.
So so we really shouldn't even consider that because that's happening either way. So it's really not part of this request. It's something that's happening anyway. But because they're building this for $56,000, we have the ability to improve to some degree communications with first responders, CPD, to areas of town where we struggle with. That's the primary reason for this. Is that kind of, in a nutshell, the easiest way to understand it?
Absolutely. And as the chief knows, it gives you redundancy as well. So in the event that one goes down, the other is still up. So public safety, again, is all about resiliency and redundancy, and this solves that.
So let me clarify again, if I could. So your microwave links for the police, they would have the ability to actually, in a line of sight circumstance, they would actually be able, through their radios, to identify whatever specific frequency is required to actually access whatever is on those microwave links. Is that correct?
Their equipment is capable of doing 4.9, yes.
Okay, it's 4.9 that's now on, that will be on those microwave links.
Just to cloud the issue, this radio system actually goes from 4.9 to 5.8, I believe, that band through there. So you can carry multiple services through that range.
Okay, so what we really get, the reason we get something out of this at Sandy Beach is the fact that you actually have police radios that can access this microwave link. Basically, that's it.
That's true. And if you look at how critical Sandy Beach has been for the police and first responders when it comes to triathlons and other events, it makes sense.
Okay, well, I can tell you directly, because since I'm one of the people who actually suffers from no service, when I go to Sandy Beach, I also have the same problem everybody else has, which is, of course, little or no service. There's little or no service at my house either. So I obviously think it's useful for us, but it's not, the microwave link is not useful. We will not have those frequencies, unfortunately. Only the police will have those.
That is correct. However, as I mentioned, the 4.9 being dedicated to the public safety, the other frequencies, 5.0, 5.4, and 5.8 are all Wi-Fi bands that allow us to put up a mesh antenna or network over the parking lot and bring back public Wi-Fi.
So it's additional stuff. Anyway, that's all. I was just trying to get clarification of exactly what we're getting, why are we getting it, and who has access to it. Okay, I got it.
And just one thing to add, you know, we keep on talking about police, but there's also a municipal radio system that the bus drivers use, that the school department uses, that DPW uses, the water and sewer. You know, in any type of critical incident, all department heads have a radio, so it'll provide communications along the shore for parts of that too.
And was I correct in when I was reading the funding request form for this, is that this is kind of a one-time opportunity that we're being offered while they're putting up the tower for it to cost $54,000? Because I was taking away that they're sort of quote unquote time sensitive in that we're getting the opportunity to put up this antenna basically with zero labor costs, because we're doing it simultaneously with the work that the wireless company is doing. Am I correct?
Okay. That's correct. As part of the RFP and the lease agreement, they have to install any antennas that we have, if we have them in stock, while they're erecting the tower. They also, as part of the RFP and the lease, agreed to buy us a $10,000 NEMA enclosure so we can house all of our gear, all of the Shrek gear, and we'll terminate the fiber from the town as well. So there's a lot of labor costs that we're avoiding by having this available to them as the tower goes up.
Right.
And what is the timing on the tower going up, just so that I have a sense on that?
I'm sorry, say again?
What is the timing on the tower going up?
I would like to say that probably once the lease is signed, we're probably looking at 9 months, maybe a year on the outside to get that erected.
I was just trying to figure out whether it had to be this funding cycle in terms of annual town meeting.
I would suspect that tower would be going up, assuming permitting and everything falls into place. I would think that you'd start seeing that tower go up in probably the fall.
Okay.
And just as a point of reference, the closest microwave communications we have with Shrek, the Shrek towns have, is where Cohasset has a satellite receiver on the roof of Hull Town Hall in their attic, which, you know, we're not sure if they're going to be staying there or not. So that's the southeasternmost radio site we have. This will expand that.
Yeah, it's very attractive to the Shrek to relocate or add additional radio antennas to this tower as well. It should improve and cover for the Shrek as well. a good portion of Cohasset they currently don't have.
Chief, my only other question for this though, and I'm just thinking about the topography of Cohasset and King Street. King Street's pretty high. And when you're on top of that hill, you've got a pretty good line of sight to the, so, I mean, have you looked into this? Have you thought about whether it's better if we have an antenna at the new facility for a police station that now has direct LOS with the beaches? Or, I mean, I'm just thinking about the topography in real time here.
So we have, on the water tower behind 135 King Street, so up, by Avalon.
Right.
We have a, repeater up there, and we also have one on Bear Hill, which is up by the high school on that tower.
Right, so we already used that topography, and we can't get what we need to get.
Yeah, we're not
even
shooting down
okay.
towards sea level.
Gotcha.
If I could add something to that, we were just awarded $220-something thousand to run additional fiber in town. 135 King Street is a recipient of not only municipal fiber, but Shrek fiber as well. Those sites that you just listed, also as part of this grant, will have fiber. The water tank behind 135 King is already terminated on our fiber backbone. So that's already a backhaul back to the police station right there. And Bear Hill is currently having fiber, Shrek fiber running as well. So there's a lot of resiliency and redundancy in what we're doing with all of this.
One of this stems from, we had a truck hit a telephone pole that held Shrek fiber in Wadley Park, on the Hull side of Wadley Park last year. In 3 of the Shrek towns, it's supposed to be a self-healing loop, but turns out it really wasn't. And we lost radios in 3 Shrek towns for multiple days. So this will be part of a solve for that.
But when our Shrek went down, that was because of a result of physical.
The truck hit a pole and broke the fiber cable by Wadley Park on the Hull side.
Okay.
We've also had it happen in Queen Anne's Corner too, so they're really trying to build up this loop. And Shrek has put a ton of money into this through state and federal grants.
I guess my only other question is, other towns using this line of sight antenna to resolve gaps in radio coverage or create redundancy. Is that something that you guys have talked to other towns locally about?
I've actually done it in Marshfield, where I came from. We actually had line of sight connectivity that was hybrid to our fiber backbone, which was leveraged by not only municipal, but also first responders as well. So yes, I've already done this in another town. And it's
But no other towns, are the towns going to access this project as well? Does it assist with, Hull or Situate?
From a first responder perspective, yes, I believe that will be available to them. But also something to consider is that as we try to change the way we manage our infrastructure, DPW, etc., water department, we'll literally have a mesh network that allows mobile units to roll through or by Sandy Beach and actually be able to connect to a network and sync up with databases that run internally. So there's a lot of benefits to this.
Okay.
This was the easy one.
Of course, that all means new radios for everybody for that purpose, though. That's not new. That's a lot of additional gear. So,
Well, if we want to.
What we can do is we can actually put 2.5 and 5.0 radios out at Sandy Beach and actually backhaul those on 5.0 or 5.8. So yeah, it would take a little bit more gear, but not much. And as far as the devices in the mobile units, nothing would change.
Okay.
Ready to move on to
Yeah,
access
let's-
points? That was a lot there,
access points,
but
yeah.
I want to keep moving here because, and again, we have follow-ups after this. So this is, the first digestion. If there's open questions, let's track them and let's answer them, but let's try to digest as much as possible.
Sure.
Okay.
Dan, do you want to kick off access points?
Sure, I'll start talking about it. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. Here my presentation. So I'm going to talk to you guys about the access point replacement project. just quickly, I have an agenda here, just the reason for the project, the benefits of the project, the process we went through for the selection and the choice that we made, cost comparison of different choices, and the product we selected and put forward in our Excel spreadsheet submittal.
Dan, are you sharing a PowerPoint with us?
Yeah.
Oh, do
Yeah,
you
share
not
that
see it?
PowerPoint. Yeah, it's in the drive, but
I
it's
don't
not
see
up.
it.
So
Oh,
Michelle, can you, oh, there we go.
sorry. You
Yeah.
guys see it now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So those of you who don't know, the access points pictured there on your left are the devices that prepare or spread our Wi-Fi network throughout these schools and town buildings. They're going to be going end of life in the next fiscal year. So essentially, if we don't replace them, we won't have a Wi-Fi network. So that's the imperative reason we're going forward with this project and asking for this money now. As part of this project, we're also proposing the replacement of our Dell network switches. And what those basically do is power and provide network connectivity for the access points. So you can't really have one without the other. The current Dell switches we have are, their expected life is about 6 years. Unfortunately, at the end of this next fiscal year, they'll be 9 to 10 years old. So we'll really want to emphasize that we should be looking at replacing those as well. The Wi-Fi and these switches are obviously used by digital learning in the school, library patrons, first responders, and an outage in one of these switches could greatly impact them. For example, one of our in the middle school, we have one Dell switch running most of the access points in there. If that switch were to go offline and we weren't able to get it back online through regular troubleshooting, we'd have to order a new switch, which with ordering timelines being what they are, that could take a week or two. So you could have a scenario where you could have a whole part of the building or the middle school being offline because we're relying on these 9 to 10-year-old switches. So it's pretty imperative that that gets funded as part of this as well. Going forward here. So benefits of the project, obviously, it will help us maintain our current network. Our current switches that we have are extreme switches, so that's what we're proposing to go forward with. Also, the newer technology allows us to access new frequencies that the current switches or current access points that we have don't do. So it should allow more stable, more reliable connections for all of our patrons across the town, schools, and et cetera. Something else the new equipment's going to allow us to do is increase our bandwidth. There's a little bit of a caveat to this. All of the equipment that we're proposing here is capable of faster speeds, but the cabling that we have in the buildings across the town can't support the faster speeds. So we did put in a capital project for 2029 in preparation at the point that we get to that we need to tap some of those speeds to put in new cabling. But that's coming down the road. That is not part of this project. Another thing we're proposing here is with the switches is that we get larger capacity switches. We basically have two options. We could buy 24 port switches, which would support this project, or we could buy 48 port switches, which would support not only this project, but potentially other projects. There's a camera project that we're going to be talking about a little bit later, and the 48 ports on the switch would not only support this one, but also that project. So there would be a cost savings there and duplicating costs. To just kind of give you guys a better picture of that, the cost of these 24 port switches, if we were to buy them for this project, would be about $102,000, and that would support this project. If we were to then only buy 24 port switches, we would need to at least duplicate that cost in order to bring the cameras online. So what we're proposing instead is buying 48 port switches as part of this project. And what that'll do is say that only increase the cost about $10,000. So your choices there is spend $102,000 twice and spend $204,000, or on this project, spend $112,000 and get the capacity we need for both projects. And even if we don't go forward with the camera project, we could use those extra ports for other things. There could be other projects down the line. So it really makes sense to go forward with that at this point. There's also an E-rate component to this, Ron, if you want to speak to that, of buying the switches as part of this project versus the camera project.
Thanks, Dan. Yes, E-rate is a factor. We get 40% off of networking equipment if it's tied to digital learning for the schools. So these switches that we're purchasing, we would get 40% off based on a formula that they utilize. So we have X amount of funding that's reimbursed to us through the FCC and how Cohasset is rated with free and reduced lunch and a number of other things as part of the formula. So yes, we would actually get or recover some amount of money from these switches if they were tied to the access points. However, I couldn't stand up in good conscience and make an argument that says this is tied to digital learning when in fact dedicated switches, the second set that we would have to buy if we went forward with the camera project, was tied to digital learning for purposes of E-rate. So what is actually driving off of these switches is a key component to E-rate. Access points, because they provide connectivity for students, is perfectly in line with E-rate. Surveillance cameras, on the other hand, is questionable at best. So that's one thing. And one thing Dan also didn't give you the number on, essentially, if you look at doing it the way Dan is proposing, the money that you can reduce the capital ask is about $21,000, and I can share that with you later. But you will take off out of it, I believe the camera projects combined was about 181,000. Well, that comes down to about 159,000 if you spend the $10,000 here for the 48 ports versus the 24. So there's a cost reduction to implement the camera project as it's combined currently.
Rod, in your submittal, you had no entry for the grant or CPC eligible. Is it fair to say we should understand that to be grant and then E-rate for potential reimbursement for some of the costs of this project?
I'm not sure I'm following you, Corey.
Sorry, in the capital request form, we have a line for like grant funding, so we can capture if something's $100,000 and we can get some money back.
Right.
You didn't specify E-rate on this. Should we, when we think about this project, think about the 40%? And can you give me a number and I can just put it in the sheet to say this is what we expect to get back?
We expect to get back for the access point project and the associated switching gear about $35,000.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you on the E-rate, you're expecting to get back $35,000, but when you were talking, Ron, you made it seem like that was contingent on just the digital learning connections, and if we were going to 48 port option, it was harder.
Let me try to rephrase. So like and Ron, let me know if I'm wrong here. If we buy a 48 port switch and it does access points and cameras, we can do E-rate. But if we're doing two 24s, only the 24 ports that do the digital learning would be E-rate eligible, not the switches we'd have to purchase for the cameras.
Correct.
So by buying a 48 port switch, we are expanding the pie of what we can claim because it's all integrated into one unit. Does that make sense, Katie? By combining the resources, the whole thing is, rather than if we had separate network systems, only half the network would be credited.
I hear you. I guess I'm a little bit simplistic in that when I hear 24 versus 48, and there's a $10,000 price difference, and we're talking about buying gear that's going to last us a decade. I'd rather spend $10,000 and get the 48 port and bonus, we get E-rate. Like the whole camera piece of it, the cost savings associated with a 48 port for cameras is actually kind of convoluted to me. I find it much easier to think about it in terms of we're investing in technology that we're going to want to utilize for an extended period of time. And for $10,000, 24 versus 48, I'm sort of buy the 48.
Yeah, there's no argument to go with the 24s. Yeah,
I'm struggling to understand why we'd buy 24s for $10,000 and shortchange us over a decade of changing IT needs.
I think we support that thinking 100%. And, it's not only cameras, it's not only access points, it's also IP phones. And there's a host of other things that are using, ports, networks these days, digital displays in the hallways and such. All of those are plugged into PoE units these days. So it meets a lot of needs.
I guess that's where it felt a little bit convoluted to me to try and justify the 48 port for using the camera project, because I really look at the camera as a standalone addition.
I don't believe we were proposing 48 for the camera project. Those were being quoted at 24 ports. So if you purchase the 48 port as part of the access point project, you eliminate $21,000 for the $180,000 that's being asked collectively across all of the camera projects. So not only are you saving $10,000 from, I'm sorry, are you saving the money from E-rate, but you're also reducing, you know, the actual ask for the camera projects. And I can show you that on a spreadsheet as well.
Okay, that's fine. For me, it's simpler to think about these as 3 discrete projects, like pitch me the access point switch conversation clean.
Yeah.
And then let's talk cameras as a whole separate conversation. Commingling them is kind of, in part because I'm still trying to understand them, Ron and Dan. So when you commingle them, it's really hard for me right now. So if we could keep it sort of a straight pitch, and I don't know how other people on the committee feel, but like, pitch me access points and switches and upgrading our Wi-Fi network, and then we can talk about what we hang off of that in a separate conversation.
Okay, well, I think the difference becomes $102 versus $112,000 between the 24 port and the 48 port. So there's the contrasting difference between the 2 different switches at this point for the APs. If you had never any intention to use additional IP phones or cameras or anything else, it would make perfect sense to put up 24 port because that manages our immediate needs. But if you're looking down the road, even a year from now, you're going to be buying additional switches because more than likely these switches that we're purchasing are going to be fully populated with access points.
And the difference is $10,000, right?
Correct.
10%.
Which is like, again, I don't mean to minimize $10,000, but in the grand scheme of things, that's de minimis to me.
Oh yeah, we're doubling our port number for 10% more just on a cost benefit there. It's pretty simple to understand. So
Actually, guys, it's not at all simple at all. The 48 port does not have more capacity than the 24 port in terms of its output, right? In other words, what it actually connects to.
throughput, but yeah.
Yeah, it is really the same. It is really all the same capability because the switch is incapable of overpowering whatever it's connected to, whether it's an Ethernet line or whatever else it's connected to, or fiber line. And that's the issue. But I guess I would like to go back to a couple of things that I think are really important to understand. As far as access points go, there is really very little difference between access points today and access points of 5 years ago. But I wasn't clear on why, in fact, anyone would actually discontinue access points. Can someone be more clear about that? Is that about the manufacturer not supporting those any longer, or is it really because we don't have a support component associated with a company that supports it, not the manufacturer, but somebody else who provides labor or other things in support? What is the real reason behind this, the access point replacements?
Dan, would you like to take that one?
Sure. So essentially, technology over time does become antiquated to some degree. Even these access points are replacing now. There has been the introduction of a technology in 2020, 2021 that brings in the 6 gigahertz bandwidth that more technology and more devices are going to. And the pitch with going with that was that it provided more connectivity and reliable connections than the lower band, the previous bandwidth. So there is actually a technology change from the ones we have currently to the ones that we're going to be buying. But essentially, there is a certain function with all these companies, those that, you know, over time, they want to replace their technology and they want you to buy new things. So they reach a point with their technology where they don't feel comfortable updating it anymore. So they don't release things like security patches and things of that nature. So if I have a device that doesn't have a security patch and there was a vulnerability in that, that leaves it open to cyber criminals out there in the world that are like, oh, hey, you're using an access point that's 5 years old. I wonder what was going on with that. So, I mean, essentially, it's driven by the manufacturer saying, this is the end of life of our product. You have to go on to something else. There's a technology component where their technology does improve, so they feel like they have to push something else out there. And then they feel that there's a certain point where it's not worth it for them to update the software patching anymore on that particular device. So they move on to something else. Do you have anything to add to that, Ron? Or?
Yeah, in the old days, we used to have what they used to call a controller, and that controller would be a physical device inside of our four walls, and we managed it. So even if the manufacturer decided they weren't going to support these with patching and other security enhancements, as Dan mentioned, we could still access our access points and manage them. We can't with this one because this is a cloud-based interface. So that means that we need the extreme access interface or the portal to gain access and control these. So without us upgrading these, the day that they go end of life, we no longer can connect to them or do a single thing with them.
So it's not the manufacturer making this decision. It's really the vendor doing this to you.
No, it's the manufacturer.
It
The
is the
manufacturer is stopping any support whatsoever for this device.
And how old are these current ones?
We installed these back in 2016 when we first started digital learning.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what we get out of this is we get an additional band, okay, as I understand it.
And we also
probably
get
very few
additional
people.
we also get additional bandwidth. So I believe if I'm not mistaken, these go to 10 gig throughput. So as digital learning evolves and changes and the requirements are higher for bandwidth, these can meet it where the single gig units that we're running with now may not. So there are a number of enhancements to this solution.
So the other side of this one is that no one's cell phone, very few cell phones, unless you've got a brand new one, has these current new bands anyway, as it turns out. So right now we've got a lot of people who won't be able to take advantage of this. You're saying in the future they will. Is that basically it?
I think the iPhone came out with 6 gigahertz years ago. Yeah, so
Yeah, it's
quite a
been
bit,
around
yeah.
since 2020, 2021.
Okay. And then with regard to the switches themselves, when you talk about cameras, you're talking about direct connected devices. Is that what you're talking about?
That's correct.
Okay, they're direct connected. They're not the Wi-Fi connections are still available, but these are more direct connected to one of your 48 port or 24 port switches, right?
Those are directly connected, and that's where they get their power. They'll
Right.
get, I believe it's 36
Okay.
volts or 39 volts to power that camera as well through that switch.
Okay, got it. Right.
The one question I had here is, and anyone who's pulled up the capital plan that we're looking at, we're millions of dollars oversubscribed. So Katie, I liked how Katie phrased it with like, let's just set the cameras on the back burner for now, and I digest that later, because I think the point is a good one, which is for 10% more for buying, again, not more throughput, but again, if you're just using IP phones, they don't need a whole lot of data, but more ports so we can do more stuff later on. Alone is probably a compelling argument. Is there a way we can phase the access points, which seem like they have a hard limit, and then the 48 port switches to minimize this funding cycle's draw?
The only way we can do that is to leave 9-year-old or 10-year-old switches in place to drive the new access points, and that is highly not recommended. That is going to be a point of failure. So the only way to reduce the cost or keep this cost as low as possible would be to adopt the 24 port PoE switches, or not replace them at all, just replace the access points for $98,000. But again, if you plug in new access points to old switching, the point of failure is the 9 or 10-year-old switches, which is going to be 11 or 12 by the time we actually fund them through a fiscal process.
I thought you were asking a different question, Corey. I didn't.
Yours is probably better than Gus, so go ahead.
Well, no, I didn't. I don't know. I guess I was expecting a question around splitting cameras versus the access point switches, but you were asking whether you could further split the access point and switches.
Correct, because as was mentioned earlier, if we were not doing any upgrades whatsoever, we could do the switches and the 24 ports, and we're kind of going from 24 port old to 24 port new. So I'm trying to buy us 12 or 16 months, right, in the funding cycle to say, okay, if we're gonna, can we do the access points and then, let's say, and the switches in the schools, but then wait on, other town buildings, which maybe aren't as learning, resource intensive. Can we push those off to a later date just to buy us a little bit of room, because we're looking at the gap we have and just, trying to grasp at straws.
Yeah, I wish I could offer you something there, but I just see end of life written on everything that's associated with this project. It's switches, it's access points, none of it's going to be supported, and it becomes, after 8, 9, 10 years old, it becomes a real liability for digital learning. and or other departments too, because every other building in the town has these as well. So it's not just digital learning, it's everything. The upside to the municipal side is we are able to drive these access points, and I say drive, I mean power them through the existing edge switches that we replaced 2 years ago with Cisco. So there's no switches that are necessary for those municipal buildings to run these new ones, just the schools. And it's only the schools that are eligible for the E-rate anyways.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a question about what we're physically going to be purchasing versus what we're leasing or licensing? Because if I'm understanding this correctly, we're going to be purchasing the switches for $112,000. But it looks like the access points is a licensing situation for 3 years. So that means that in 3 years, we're going to be investing another $98,000. Is that the right way to think about it?
No. So the one benefit about the Extreme versus the Dell or the Cisco Meraki that Dan is showing on the screen is that Extreme gave us a significant break because the majority of our access points are educational based or K-12. So we were able to get 3-year licensing or service level agreements for 3 years on an educational pricing, which was less or the same as 1 year for some of the other manufacturers. So from that perspective, we're happy to go with Extreme as well because Extreme is our current product. So there's no learning curve from our technology staff to know what they're doing with these or deploy them. We know this. It's literally going to be seamless to bring these new ones into our existing interface. So
I'm sorry, so maybe I'm just caught up on a license.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, a license expires.
So the license is tied to the ability to manage the access point and have a service level agreement. I can tell you that the existing costs associated with all of our access points is about $20,000 annually. So we pay about $20,000 annually to manage and support and have the manufacturer support all of our access points across the town. So there is a service level cost and license associated with each access point that is combined into this $98,000.
Ron, how is that paid for now? Because just back to this good discussion about what's a capital versus what's, like we don't pay for, 365 subscriptions. So is this an ongoing like operational cost?
Yeah. So in the third year or the fourth year, we'd actually be building this into the IT budget, and it's already in the IT budget. It's just supporting new access points versus old.
Okay, so yeah, we may not be able to, or really it may not be appropriate for us to fund that part out of capital, but so we can talk to Chris, about, another way to get that 30 grand for this project, just so it's not coming out of our capital account.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that the $98,000 is $30,000. I don't know that number specifically, what they're charging for these new access points, a service level agreement. What I do know is that they gave us a 3-year agreement for the cost of one. So there is no reduction that we're going to gain by going with Extreme access points on the service level agreement side. They're giving us 2 years free for a single year of SLA built into this.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just talking about what parts of this we can, if we consider that the SLA is part of the purchase, then maybe we can fudge that. I'm just trying to be clean about, what we spend, because again, we go through this other departments too, what's operational, what's capital. So that's something that we'll bang around internally here to figure out.
We're fully sensitive to that. We know we went through that with the Cisco products and the FortiGate firewalls, everything. We reduced those to a single year versus a 3. So yeah, we understand that. But in this case, I wasn't able to do that because of the way they quoted it.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry, I'm still a little fuzzy here. So break it down for me.
Okay. So let's say you had 98 access points you were buying on, or let's say 980 to make it easy.
Yeah.
Each access point was going to charge you $100 or $1,000, whatever the math turns out to be. That amount is being inclusive of the $98,000 for the 176 access points we're asking for 3 years. There is no additional cost in years 2 or 3. We're purchasing service level agreements for all the access points up front. It's years 4 and 5 or 6 and 4 and furthermore that we have to make sure that the money we maintain in our IT budget, operational budget, covers those additional years.
Okay,
Yeah, as I think of it, like if you buy a product and it comes with a 1-year warranty, is that part of the product cost? But then if you add the 2 and 3 year additional, that's really not part of the product cost, it's a service cost. So if these items come with 1 year, but we're getting 3 years for free, that's what I'm saying. It's a little bit cloudy about where we land on that. So I think we can bang that around more internally to figure out how we, yeah, that makes sense.
and it's just, and again, pardon my ignorance, but on the switches, it's a one-time purchase, you own it.
The switches do have a license as well.
Okay,
And it's the same situation where basically they got, as Ron had mentioned, they gave us a 3-year education price that essentially matches the 1-year price for standard licensing. So it just kind of makes sense that you get 2 years free, that you'd buy the one that's all intents and purposes pretty much equal. But that's pretty standard across all hardware and technology in terms of what we do, is that you have to buy a license in order to manage it.
yep.
That's just kind of the way they've gone with everything.
Okay.
I have a quick question. I just want to make sure, go back to something that I think was said earlier in this conversation. The 224 that we're looking at here with the extreme, which is also reflected in the funding request form. I think you guys had mentioned that there was a $35,000 grant, give or take, that was available. Is that right? But did I misunderstand that? And if so, if that's true, does the 224 already factor that in or not?
So the 35,000 that was discussed was tied to what we call E-rate. So
Okay.
the FCC gives towns, schools specifically, K-12, money back based on money spent for ISP services. So that's called Category 1, internet services. And we probably receive, I don't know, $12,000, $15,000, $18,000 back because of the money we spent for that. And then there's Category 2, which is essentially hardware, networking hardware, firewall switches, access points. If we spend, based on Cohasset's formula, if we spend this $224,000, we will get $35,000 of this reimbursed to us. And it gets a little more cloudier than that, in that we are, as Cohasset, we're issued X amount of dollars every 5 years that we can spend to improve our K-12 environment. And I would say that we've probably accumulated about $200,000 in reimbursements when you stop and think of all of the network switches we purchased, the firewalls, access points, all of those things we've done in the last 5 or more years. We've received a great deal of that reimbursed back to the town.
Does that
So
go
it-
back into the general fund?
Right. I was just gonna ask that question.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's out of my ballpark, and
So we
that's an
don't know
accounting
that-
question.
Okay.
Well, I
And-
mean, I think it's up to us. I mean, we can appropriate not enough money, or we can appropriate enough money with the explicit request that it gets turned back to us when we get the E-rate back. I mean,
Yeah.
we've done that with other things.
I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel on this one. I think that all I would say on the E-rate is this, I remember this from when I was working on digital learning with Ron back in the day in 2015, 2016. And I know it came up at Capitol. I know that there's been a way that this has been handled by Capitol and the town in the past. So I guess I'd ask Michelle just to report back to us as to how E-rate has been handled in the past, and we can take that information. It's not like this is a new thing. And as Ron has mentioned, we've benefited significantly from it over the years. So let's just get the facts around how E-rate has been treated, and then we can go from there. I don't think we need to make this up, make up policy based on what's happened over the last decade.
Totally fair. Great.
The other question I would have is really very different with regard to especially the Wi-Fi access points. When I went to look up Extreme and IOCT here, if that's how you pronounce it, I could not figure out where these things were really manufactured. And my question to you is, have you actually researched where these things actually are coming from? Because I don't believe, so far as I can tell, there's any engineering talent in any of these. Looking at all of the head count of these companies, there's very little engineering talent. So the question is, where are these specific devices really made, or where are their semiconductors actually acquired? Do you know?
I know that we did a level of research back in 2016 on manufacturers, Extreme specifically, because that's who we selected, but I honestly can't tell you, it's been too long, Ralph, to know where they are actually located.
The reason
It isn't AOT though. AOT is just an implementation company or deployment
right.
company.
That's
So
right.
it's they are not the manufacturer here.
That's right. So the reason to ask the question is that it's always my suspicion on these things that having then developed largely in the United States, it's been taken in, and very little of this stuff is actually manufactured any longer in the United States. Most of it is actually, if it's not manufactured in the United States, it's assembled maybe in the United States. But all of the semiconductors and all of the software is coming from somewhere else. Usually it comes from TSMC, but not that's Taiwan, but not necessarily. Some of it may well be from China. And I only ask the question because of all the vulnerabilities we have these days, is that this kind of networking equipment, if it's vulnerable, and there'll be an attempt to make it vulnerable if it's coming from China. So that's the question to you, and it would be desirable to have the answer to that before you really commit yourself to something as large as the purchase as this. So
no, I share your observation and your thoughts on the security side. Dan has assumed the role of the security officer of the town now, and he's immersed in this every single day. And China or somebody else writing a back door to their code so they could come in and gain access to systems and networks is not above them. I doubt it very much. I think that they could definitely have written code or intend to run code that may be deployed 8 years out or 5 years out or whatever it is. So yes, I share those concerns with you, Ralph. We live it every single day. It's tough, as you mentioned, to find American-made electronics these days and programming, these types of things. So to some degree, I think we're going to be at the mercy of some of these manufacturers, but Extreme in this particular case, and Meraki and even Aruba was another one we looked at. A lot of these are enterprise grade solutions. And so if we're going down, then so is GM and Ford and Wall Street and all of these other places, unfortunately. But we will do our diligence and see if we can uncover any more information on that.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, like TP-Link is about to be banned, Huawei in the past, so there's definitely brands that we can't use anymore. But I do think, Ron, I mean, if we're buying these with government grants and whatnot, that there's probably vetting that's above most of our pay grades that's being done.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if Extreme specifically is on the state's procurement or state contract, but there are a lot of vendors out there that support them and sell them. So, there's my one throat to choke, so to speak. I can go after the vendor who sold me, and assuming I have the SLA in place, I can raise a lot of noise, and they can get that back to the manufacturer.
But I mean, I look at it from a slightly different perspective, which is we've been using Extreme for the last 10 years. And it doesn't sound like you've had concerns or issues. Otherwise, you wouldn't be recommending doubling down and adding switches from the company.
Yeah, there are very few manufacturers that I'll put my neck on the line for, but Extreme would be one of them. Cisco would be another. Dell was a nightmare for us, to be honest with you. It was the cheapest solution we went with for networking equipment, and it worked. But every once in a while, for no apparent reason, it would lock up and public safety and everything else would go down, and Dan and myself would be in here at 11 o'clock at night getting things back up and working. Extreme, Cisco, and even the FortiGates that we have, they're pretty rock solid from what we've seen.
Okay.
And I mean,
So Ron, one of the ways to deal with it is segmenting your network. I assume we have a well segmented network.
We have a
We
very
do.
segmented network.
Yeah, Dan's done a phenomenal job on the security side, making sure that all traffic is isolated based on business function and such. It's really impressive. And I can tell you that we've had a number of incidences that we've had to bring in, security companies in the state to look at our systems. And they were pretty impressed with how we were set up. So we should feel really good about the security fabric we have in place. Dan's done a really nice job with that.
Thank you.
Just one follow-up question about the comment in the funding request about wiring. That is an upgrade that we would need to do in the future in order to be able to access the 6 gigahertz upgrades.
No.
Okay,
So,
sorry.
no worries. So basically each Ethernet connection that's run on the school is capable of going at 1 gigabyte per second, which at the time was basically the maximum throughput you're getting on these. These devices are capable of connecting at 5 gigabits per second and 2.5 gigabits per second. If they have the right wiring in place. Right now, based on the feedback I see in our Forta monitor, which is the device that we have that looks and can monitor network ports, we don't need it, but we have that capacity in the future. And what that project is in the 10-year plan is that should we reach a time where we need to increase our throughput because more and more stuff is going to the cloud, more and more stuff is going online, that we would need to redo some wiring in the buildings in order to make that effectively work.
Okay.
So to clarify, Dan, you're saying we're going to go from 1 to 2.5, and we have the opportunity to go to 5 if we do the wiring.
So we're actually going to stay at 1, and then
Oh, we're gonna
2.5
stay at 1.
and 5 are capabilities of it, I should say.
I see.
Okay, is that,
But you need the wiring to go to 2.5 to 5.
Yes.
well, right now, what are we running? Cat 6 cable? Is that what it is, Dan?
Yeah, I think it's actually Cat 5e.
5E
But-
based on the building, yeah.
Okay, once you get above that, you're not doing twisted pair, you're doing something else, right? If you were to go above to, it wouldn't be twisted pair, I don't think, is it?
You can still do twisted pair on 6 or 6A or 7 twisted pair. Yeah. Up to depending on the, sorry, Ron and Dan, this is you go ahead. I'll stop geeking.
2 gigahertz?
You were doing good. Keep going, Corey.
I've got 10 GD in my house. So anyway.
Well,
So
I'm
we-
just thoroughly impressed.
So we did have some, we did talk to some vendors about it, and we would I believe it's 6A is what we'd be looking to go to if we did move forward with that. But again, right now, we don't need it, so we're not
And-
proposing it as part of this project.
And by the way, that's also E-rate eligible too. So when we get refunded in 2026 for another $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, whatever it happens to be, we can go after that, and a great deal of that would be reimbursed as well.
And is that the $300,000 project that I see in 2029? Is that what that wiring is estimated at?
No, there's multiple components to that. The wiring, I think, was maybe a third of that, if that. And
Okay.
another thing to consider too, we've actually got a facilities department now that is actually certified in terminating Cat 5, Cat 6. They actually did a project for their HVAC system this past summer, and they must have ran about 140 Cat 6 cables to all these and terminated them. So I'm living large as far as the help we're getting from facilities.
That's great to know.
Yeah.
And all the
You-
switches we're buying are up to 5 gig capable. So we have the access point, and we have the switches able, so it's just the copper in between
Right.
that.
Ron, you had mentioned something ancillarily about an upgrade to the fiber network and a $200,000 grant.
Yeah, so the state has offered us a number of grants, and we've really cleaned up. We've probably brought in $500,000 in the last 2 years from grants from the state. One of the ones, one of the larger ones we just received was this past summer for $224,000 roughly in there to run fiber, extend fiber to a number of different buildings or facilities. So we're wrapping that project up now. Currently, we ran 2 fiber runs, one for the Shrek dispatch to 135 King. We also extended the network to 135 King for the municipal network. We've extended the fiber for the Shrek to Bear Hill, so they have resiliency there along with their line of sight. And we also ran fibering and put it outside of the Wheelwright Park with anticipation of once that goes up and the conduits go in, we'll be terminating any connectivity coming in through the line of sight or the wireless link back into our fiber backbone at that point as well.
Okay, thank you. That was
Yes.
just sort of ancillary, but I always like to hear about grant money. I'm looking through my notes here. Oh,
Dan, you can take that down.
Okay. So this was obviously the breakdown of the quotes that we had captured, and as you can see, Cisco is by far and away the most expensive. We also quoted replacing the Dell switches that we had, which was also pricier than the option we are going with, which is the Extreme option. Then that would be implemented by the company AOT, who's what vendor that we commonly use. In the prices here, obviously we have the access points, the switches. This implementation cost is actually only applying to the switches. One of the benefits of going with the Extreme access points is because we have already implemented that Wi-Fi system across the town, that the process for bringing in new access points is pretty simple. All we have to do is load the MAC addresses up to the Extreme portal that we use, and then sign a profile, give it a username for a classroom, and then essentially just walk around and implement them. Whereas if we were to go with a completely different access point manufacturer, we're talking about weeks or months of work in terms of rebuilding the entire network environment, or Wi-Fi network environment. And then, of course, we have to pay for our staff training to learn how to use the new system. So that is another reason, I mean, in itself, and that they're most cost effective already, but beyond that, it just makes sense for us to stick with Extreme. And so we've already talked about a lot of this. We talked about how, we're getting devices that are capable of, providing better Wi-Fi service, better throughput, better connectivity should we need it in the future. How we can seamlessly integrate these Extreme access points into our environment without a lot of overhead from labor costs. Or we talked to our systems administrator who will be doing this, and ultimately he said that he could get these loaded into our system in 2 days, and then we'll obviously go around, tackle it, and go up and put them up around town. So
this is I mean, it's a big project, but you don't see any issues to being able to deploy this within, the fiscal year?
not if we do it with Extreme, we should be good to get it done over the summer because we already have it largely implemented, and we've already brought in, I mean, we do have a few new switches around town. So we've brought in new switches that are the same model that we've already been using, but we've just done a case by case basis, obviously. So we're very confident.
We should probably broach the subject of existing IT capital budget funding that we have for networking and data center. We have discussed in the past with Michelle, and I think Corey as well, that there was some money we're sitting on as we wrap up a couple of projects. You could redeploy that money. I think it's about $100,000 for this, which would expedite not only the purchasing of the APs and getting those up, but also applying for the E-rate sooner than later. So that may be something that, you guys will have to discuss at some point with potentially Michelle and maybe accounting. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
actually discussed that with them, Ron. Thank you for.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got it on our list,
we're
right?
aware
Yeah,
that there are
100
funds coming back.
$100,000. Yeah.
Is that the
And
100? Is that the 108 that is already in the 384 we've been talking about? Sorry.
384 we're talking about?
So there's $384,000 in turnbacks that we're looking at in terms of a previously appropriated funds that are no longer being used. I think in that number.
It's 100 in the spreadsheet currently. Data set upgrade and network security 70 and 30. I don't know if these have been rounded, but that's what I see.
Oh yeah, 70. So I'm sorry, you're right. 70 and 30 is 100,000.
Right.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah,
That's correct.
yeah. I mean, Ron, as we talked as a committee to try to treat these as kind of going in and just not earmarking one department for another department, but with the eye towards if we can get something done, we'll try to do it. So that's a non-commitment. It's part of the process, but we're not treating it as okay, $100,000 off the top, just internally. So
Okay, great. Worth a mention.
But thank you for turning it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
And thank you for reminding us. Yeah.
we did a lot of that work ourselves. We ended up with finding a less expensive solution for a storage unit that saved us thousands and thousands of dollars. So in the last hours, we were able to do some things that, saved the town some money. So we're pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
Nice job.
And just so I'm clear on implementation timeline, it's really the switches that are the time intensive part of this.
So the switches we're actually going to have done by our vendor AOT. So that was the $14,000 for them. So
But in terms of like actual switch over time, that it sounds like the access points is pretty much an easy swap out that you guys can do. And then the switches you're going to have AOT do, but that will require some amount of, call it 6, 8, 12 weeks to do. You said over the summer.
Correct.
right.
Okay. All right. I guess the question is, do we have the mental bandwidth to tackle cameras, or do we want to hive that off into a separate conversation? Or
I think we should probably tear that off. We're already at 2 hours. The other thing is the cameras, we're going to have Ron and Dan or Ron available for some technical maybe questions we have, but the policy of where they go and the security concerns, we probably want to have that under executive session. I don't think we want to talk about the schools and their issues in public meeting. So I think for next Monday, Susan, I see you nodding your head. That's going to be our plan of attack, is to take the cameras and have invite all the department heads, talk about the cameras by themselves. We're talking library, we're talking senior center, we're talking schools, have executive session where necessary, and have technical experts if necessary as well. Does that fly with everybody?
Makes good sense.
I agree about executive session, especially as it relates to the schools. Do we need to have all the department heads? That's just a lot of people to try and coordinate for one evening, or could we have Chief Quigley step in and talk about some of the, again,
I want to have the department heads, because as I understand it, they were kind of the ones who initiated the request. So like I know for rec and for library, they've got their thoughts about why they want to have them. Senior center had different reasoning for why they wanted to have them.
Okay.
And I think Chief can give us security questions, but really like how are they going to be used in operations is something that I think each department that's had a request potentially has a little bit of a different story about where they want to be, how they want to be used. I added that to our sheet, that master sheet that I made, which is like notes about, are these just to review, to protect something? Are they in active use, like a school? You need the active cameras to respond to something. I had a conversation with somebody from the senior center that says sometimes they have patients that are in mental health care or memory care. And if somebody walks off, it's good to have a real time kind of thing. It's not just review. Chief, you just popped up. So do you want to take over?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure it would be productive for a committee like this to get involved in that type of detail, where cameras are going and the reasons for cameras and things like that. I don't know. Is there any value in that?
Well, I think for us, it's just if there's going to be, let's say, 48 cameras, where are they going, and is it important? I think that's really our oversight there is, again, if there's going to be 24 cameras in the school, there's already 5. I don't think we're going to get too deep into it, but I do think we just have to do some sort of initial pass as to where the numbers come from.
It just reminds me of years past, when we've asked for police cars, and we've had, this years ago, members of this committee, at the police station telling me, where lights on the car should go. It's just,
that's not our
everybody's got
intention.
an expert. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's.
I think it's
but
more the size of the request, Chief. It's $233,000. And
these questions are going to come up later on at town meeting or whatever. So we want to have a space where everyone can be comfortable. And that way, we've done the due diligence. It's not, I don't think it's at all intentionist for us to Monday morning quarterback anyone. on this, but
Yeah.
also it's good to hear from the schools, right? So.
Yeah, but it's just, keep in mind, it's very limited, as to, there's overarching security plan and policy that, probably don't belong in public. I appreciate the executive session, but to get involved in the minutia of, what corner and, what angle of view a camera's gonna have is just, I think that's out of bounds for some committees and should really be left to a conversation between the department head and, in the case of the schools, we have someone who's in charge of security at the schools, Lieutenant Lopes. So that's really, to debate at a granular level, where cameras are going to be and what they're going to be recording. I just don't.
I think we'll be okay. I think we can have a good faith kind of space for this. But I do think for like, but also like, let's say Paul Pratt's got 5, right? Are they just outside? Or is one, that kind of thing where we just are going to have a basic level understanding of what we're buying. And I know select board's going to have questions and this is going to be delicate. And I think, again, this is not, I think we can have a good faith being sensitive to all the concerns that you have. And anytime, if you're part of the conversation, anytime you say, listen, this is something you just got to trust us on, you please feel free to let us know whenever we are going too far, but I don't think that's our intention.
I'd like to clarify something on this, Bill. It is a policy question. At a high level, it's a significant policy question. It's about the amount of surveillance that we intend to do and why. So at that level, I think because it's a major capital expenditure, it is an absolutely appropriate question for capital budget. We are the ones who have to approve it. And if we don't feel comfortable with the policy, then in fact, we ought to say it. And I think it's important, and it has nothing to do with placement on corners or any other thing. It has to do with overall surveillance, its purposes, how it will be used, and those kinds of things, and that's entirely appropriate for us.
Ralph, would you think that
it is an industry standard now? I mean, municipal buildings, government buildings have cameras. It's a fact of life. You can't drive down Route 3 without, a plate reader capturing your plate. I mean, that's just the way it is. I don't like it either, but the reality of it is what it is.
We are capable of making our own independent decision, as you know, and therefore it's a policy question, Bill. It's not
Chief, have you presented to
somebody else does it, we should have to do it. So
have you presented to select board yet on this at all? Because I mean, typically we hear requests first, but to Ralph's point, if there's a policy aspect here, it may be helpful to let select board jump into the policy question before we get into the money question. Have you had select board conversations yet?
So Corey, select board's going to hear this for the first time tomorrow night as part of the 10-year capital plan.
And there is already cameras, in most buildings. So this is more of a replacement, if I'm correct, Ron.
Well,
There's a lot more.
but that's a question, Chief. Like
That's a question. So
we don't even know that.
Correct.
Like part of the reason we want to talk about cameras is like of the 64, what's replacement, what's new? I mean, just a fundamental question.
If I could just weigh in on something, I look at cameras these days and I kind of follow where the chief is going with this, and that it's kind of like you don't want to put out there your security fabric or your security initiatives or goals to the public anymore. We get a lot of freedom of information requests that we turn down because they have a security component to them. This is different than data, obviously, but it still has a security vulnerability to the building and to its occupants if you put too much information out there. And I'll leave it there. It's just the way the world has changed and how we have to view things sometimes.
Okay, so let's lid this for tonight. I will, with Susan, talk with the town manager's office. We'll see how the select board talks on Tuesday. And then for our Monday meeting, we'll be very clear about the scope of what we want to talk about, how we're going to talk about that. That way this committee can do its job, make its vote, and where we know where we all are. Is that okay with everybody? We can cap this and we'll figure out where we are for next week and be on the same page.
Yeah, if Susan and Corey, you guys can send out an email to the committee and just let us know what the rules of engagement are, what decisions were made. I'm fine with that as long as it's just communicated back to everybody.
We will. Yeah, we'll sort this out so that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, but right now, like sitting in our OneDrive, our individual requests chief for each of the departments for all these cameras. So we have to sort of figure out how to get it through the capital budget snake. Like,
Understood. And like I said, a lot of these cameras have existed since probably at least 2011. So I have to assume they're at end of life and being replaced.
yeah.
All right. I think we can let our guests go unless anyone has anything not camera related.
I do not.
All right, great
I guess
presentation,
my only-
Dan. Nice job.
I guess my only question is like, is the count 64 cameras? Does that sound right to you, Ron?
To be honest with you, Katie, I haven't tallied them all up across all of the departments, so I'm not really sure.
Okay.
Whatever my list, Katie, was as my count as of today. I went through all of them, so it should be accurate.
Okay. It was just missing Town Hall, Elm Street. There were a bunch of facilities that weren't in that, which is.
We don't have requests for those. Yeah, that's the thing.
Well, that's sort of why I asked the question, which is 64 is what we have in hand.
Right.
But there are facilities that haven't put forward a request. So is that they're
Again,
not asking, or?
We got some work to do before next week. I'll
Okay.
leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. Thank you
Great.
very much, Ron. Dan, if you're still there as well.
Thank you very much.
No
Good
problem.
seeing everyone.
Have a good night.
You too.
You.
Bye.
Good night.
Okay, couple minutes on liaisons. Did anybody over the break do anything, make any contact or set up any meetings? Or, no big deal if we didn't, because everybody was probably with their families, but just a quick time to update that.
Ralph and I have 2 meetings this week. We've got a meeting with facilities on Thursday and DPW on Wednesday. So we'll have more substantive updates for the committee after we meet with those people, with those departments. And we've asked for a list of sort of what their preliminary requests look like, and we'll upload that to the OneDrive so that we're beginning to collect this master picture, as Ralph has alluded to. And then Corey and I are meeting with schools tomorrow to sort of, and this will probably be the first meeting where we have kind of a complete list, because up until this point, it's been more, how do we work well together, and sort of onboarding the new superintendent to sort of the capital process. So I think we'll get more granular. One of the questions that I'm going to ask to each of these departments is when they think they're going to be ready to actually fully present to the full committee. So that'll be one thing that I will feed back to you, Susan, you, Corey, and you, Michelle, so that we can start getting people on the agenda, start cranking through all the information. But I think the meetings this week are really to further feel that out.
Okay, great.
And I've reached out, but only just today, to both the harbor master and Bronwyn at the library. I haven't heard back yet, but I don't expect to, because like I said, I just sent the emails out a little bit before this meeting. So.
Yeah, and Ralph and I are still going to try to reconnect with Ron. We pushed it off, but we heard a lot today. But Ralph, I'm sure there's stuff that we want to dive back into as well that you didn't get to say today. So whatever you want to, after you get all through this, if you got time, we can sit down with Ron and Dan.
Yeah, sure.
And talk about Chromebooks too, and all the other stuff that we didn't get to talk about tonight, because
Yeah,
we've already
Yeah, there's
digested
a
so
lot of
much.
stuff there. Yeah.
Can I just ask on the 10-year capital plan, where is it living in the OneDrive? I did a search this afternoon and couldn't find the document that you sent me. So if I don't know if I'm not on that folder, or I literally cannot find it.
It's under the semi-annual records tab, I believe.
No, it's in FY 2026 requests, and it was added. Michelle moved it over just at about 2 o'clock today, looks like.
Yeah.
So
No, I looked for it. I didn't.
Oh,
find
right,
it
there it
either.
is, yeah,
I
right.
didn't
Yeah,
find it after 2. Yeah, right.
yeah, and that
Yep.
we're getting there. We got a new organization here. So now
All right.
That's all.
Complete-
We'll all try to be on the same page about where stuff goes because yeah, the semi-permanent records, that's gotten me a bunch of times too.
Yeah.
So
The other
That's
thing,
it.
yeah, the other thing that would be helpful is what we used to do too, was we would have some history. So you could look back 3 or 4 years and then you could look forward 10 years, right? You know, just trying to get a much more comprehensive look at the whole thing is really, I've been saying all along, of course, looking at the whole picture from past to future is really important to help make better decisions, I think. Also to actually making compromises among all of these departments. We have not heard about the really big expenditures yet to come in addition to what we've already heard. So, you know, trying to put it all into your head and say, okay, what things really are going to drop off, and let's not kid ourselves about it, because quite frankly, we have a $1.5 million to spend or something in that order. And, you know, you're going to get $3 million worth of charges, so, or asks. And the real question is, how do you really, we don't really know what that looks like right now. And therefore, it'd be nice to know that. And that's all I can say about why I think looking at a comprehensive look at this thing is so critical. So,
Well,
If I'm reading the
and-
spreadsheet correctly, we're at 5.7 for fiscal 26 right now.
is that all?
That's all.
aspirational would be a good adjective. But I don't think this hasn't been broken up to the
Yeah.
special stabilization funds. It's kind of an all and everything. it
Oh,
looks
is that
like.
right?
So
Okay.
yeah. So I mean, we
Yes.
still don't get to affordability, but we're we get through some of this with the special purpose funds. So
Okay.
That is true.
I'm
And
sure
to your
there's stuff
point,
that's
Ralph,
not on
about,
here yet.
I'm sorry,
And it's
Susan?
probably things that aren't on here yet. that
Well,
happens.
Uh-huh.
But to Ralph's point, Ralph, now that we are on OneDrive and we have a number of years of history, it is pretty easy to just put a linkage to documents like you're talking about, like pull up the rolling stock, say for the police from a prior year.
Yeah.
You just point to the document elsewhere in the OneDrive. And I think I was telling Michelle how to do that, but that's something that we can make sure.
That'd be helpful. I guess mine's even a higher level than that. It's really just to see the whole picture and the high numbers. I mean, all the numbers, and then within those, yes, I would be delighted to be able to, click on one and say, okay, now I can look at the specifics. That would be a really terrific addition to what we have. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, Ellen Marr had done a capital budget approved history that she had shared with Corey and I, but it was missing sort of 2025. And so my plan had always been to sort of update it and share it to the full committee, but it provides that history without any links, but it will literally show you by department what each of the expenditures were from 2015 annual town meeting all the way through current town meeting.
Yeah. No, I've done that by literally manually downloading the warrants, or at least the motions. That's what I've had to do.
The only benefit of this is that Ellen took the time to do it for 10 years, and I just need to update it for 18 months or less. And so I will do that and circulate it. But it'll be a separate document from the 10-year plan. So if we ever want to integrate the two, we can certainly do that. But at least we'll have history in one document and forward looking in another.
That's great. Okay.
Fantastic.
And just on which folder we use, I mean, for me, things like the 10-year plan, the look back should be in the current FY26 request, because we're going to kind of update that every year we have a cycle. We're going to have a new 10-year plan that, drops off 1 year. So that shouldn't be a semi-permanent. Semi-permanent should be policies, documents that we reference, but we should have anything that's, even if it's something that rolls over, if it's contextualized within this year, we should have it in the 2026 folder. Does that make sense? The logic break to everybody?
Yep.
Absolutely does. To be sort of flipping around the OneDrive, looking for documents versus having it all in the current year.
Yeah, if we just, and that's why also I found folder colors. So now 2026 is what, orange or whatever. So that was my fun this afternoon. So
we can get really
fancy
cool
there.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, so it's 9:03. It's been 2 hours. Do we want to go over the funding request in the next meeting? put that into the next meeting?
I would say yes, please.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
I agree. Been a long meeting. All right then.
Can we at some point get on the minutes bandwagon? I know, but
Michelle,
Yeah.
any word from
Show us-
Leontino?
if we don't harp on it now, it'll be June and we'll be really upset with ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll have
Mhm.
those not next meeting, but the meeting after. We'll be all
Okay.
caught up. We have someone else also doing the minutes, so Leontina's not the only one at this point, so that's great that she'll have some help because she has a lot of committees on her plate.
Yep.
Okay.
And one other thing, as far as next week's meeting, if you could just send me the agenda items sooner than later, that would be helpful. Because I certainly just don't want to get caught at the end of the week without any items to put on the agenda.
Yep.
Right, well, yeah, well, let's talk about availability of people to present. What, do you know of anybody who's going to be ready to present, or are we gonna bring forth people from our liaison conversations?
I think high-level conversations, I think facilities will be ready, at least to present the town side, maybe not the school side, but I think Corey and Katie, you'll learn more tomorrow from the schools if they'll
Okay.
be prepared.
Okay. But let's connect, Susan and Michelle, let's connect sometime Thursday,
Okay,
and we'll see where the camera discussion is, because the camera discussion, if it's ready for us, because they figured out how to go, that may be an hour alone, or not, I don't know. And if we also have the request form updated, that's gonna be our second deliverable. That's a 90-minute meeting right there. So I don't want to overstack it, and go hunting around for other people if we've already had that kind of big thing ahead of us, if that makes sense.
I think that makes sense.
So tentative
I'll-
cameras and request form for the 13th.
Yeah, current capital budget requests list, yeah, and request form review, yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, we can build what Ralph was looking for, because we've had that in the past. Get us a working document together,
Yep.
review Susan's new request form, and talk cameras. I think that's a full meeting.
Okay. And then we can't meet on the 20th because it's MLK, so our next meeting after that would be on the 27th. Unless we want to do something other than a Monday of MLK week.
Yeah, that's correct.
I would hope that we'd be, I would hope by the 27th, we'd have like a list of people that were just slotting into meetings at that point. Like,
I think we will.
I mean, I feel like trying to push, I'm not sure, I mean, Michelle, you know better, but it didn't feel like DPW or facilities was sort of jumping up and down saying, we want to get in to see you. Like.
So I think with, you know, the town hall projects being kind of resurrected, they're just trying to find their way as to some potential projects to move forward. So I just don't think they're ready yet. But with your meetings this week, I'm sure you'll hear more about that topic as well. So I agree, come the 27th, you'll have your pick at who's ready. And then I think mid-February, I think we need to start talking about more of the larger infrastructure projects, which would be the RTF, the public safety buildings, things like that. So there's a lot to get through, and we always think we have enough time until we don't.
Yeah.
Just
I do think
one-
we're,
Okay,
ahead,
just
Ralph,
a
sorry.
quick one. Just one quick request, Michelle. It's always helpful when you send out a reminder of a capital budget meeting and it shows up on my calendar. Because then I don't have to go hunt for that. This time it did not. And I wondered perhaps the time it was a vacation time, that didn't happen. But nevertheless, it is terrific when it does show up and we just do a response and it shows up on my calendar automatically. Is that something you want to continue doing or not?
I mean, and I can generate that before the agenda's even set.
Okay,
I'll just put
that's
on a
helpful.
reoccurring meeting, so everyone
Yeah.
will have that on their calendar.
Then it makes it easy just to click on the Zoom link and
Sure.
And you're in, yeah.
Easy enough.
And basically, as a newbie, I should expect weekly meetings for February, except for President's Day. Just as calendar blocking.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay,
And we'll determine the Thursday before, we'll confirm or not the meeting and the agenda the Thursday before
Okay.
every week. So
okay.
if we can,
So-
if we don't have anything by Thursday, if no one's given us the stuff they need, I think we just give them the hand and say, well, talk to us when you're ready.
Again, that would require some notice back to the group, I think, Corey, if that's necessary, right?
Well, yeah. So Ralph, I was thinking about, or Michelle's suggestion about doing a recurring meeting. I wonder if it's better for us just to, on Thursday, send out the calendar invite. That way, that's the confirmation. We don't have a standing meeting that we then have to cancel. Which do you think is better? Having just a standing meeting that we cancel, or that we actively book the meeting when we know it's ready?
Well, I guess what I look for is first to know that there's a meeting as number one, and number two, to know what the agenda is. Those are the two big questions. So however we get that, I'm happy, but it'd be nice if it were sent out. And if
Gotcha.
you want to just simply have the meetings automatic, I can actually put that in my calendar, just make it automatic. But then as the calendar is the actual detail of the meeting or the specific topics we're going to discuss, then needs to go out some way, which is easy for us to grab, and that's all I can suggest. It's not that it's impossible for me to go and get it. It's just it's easier if there's one place that we can go and grab it.
Notification.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha.
So I think, Corey, what you're suggesting is best. We'll meet on Thursdays, pull the agenda together, send out a meeting invite so it's fresh, and we'll attach the agenda to
The
it.
agenda. Yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be
Okay.
great. Yeah.
That's how we did on select board. I thought that was a good process. So
Okay. But just for general planning, this month, it'll be the 13th and the 27th. And then for February, it'll be the 3rd, 10th, and 24th. Most likely.
yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, since President's Day, correct. We'll opt that.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to keep keeping the Dugan house organized.
All right then.
Okay.
All right, well, great, guys. I think we're done for the evening. Does anybody want to put in a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I will second.
Seconded, okay, roll call vote. Francine,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Ralph,
Ralph Dormitzer, aye.
Katie,
Katie Dugan, aye.
Lori,
Corey Evans, aye.
and Susan Franklin, aye. It is
Thank you, everybody.
11 PM. We're done.
Exactly. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Right.